I want to start off by asking you this question. Has anybody ever looked at your life and looked at your circumstances and counted you out? Did they look on and say that, you know what, this is not going to happen for you? Maybe perhaps they dismissed your goals, they dismissed your dreams, or they counted you out because you didn't have the right degree. They counted you out because you were a little older than the rest. They counted you out because of some past disappointments and failures that you made. They counted you out because of some past judgments, some errors in your judgment in the past. And as a matter of fact, have you ever counted yourself out? That moment where you wanted to do something, where you were meaning to do something, and before you even got started, you talked yourself out of it. That book that you wanted to write, that somehow you talked yourself out of it and convinced yourself that you weren't qualified to write that book. That voice of yours, that story of yours you've been wanting to share, but somehow you counted yourself out and figured that maybe perhaps it's not worth you sharing. Is there something at some point or another that you wanted to do, the business that you wanted to start, or go back and get the degree, or is there something that you wanted to do, but ultimately you counted yourself out? And if that's ever happened to you, I want you to understand this. I need you to understand this. As a matter of fact, that the only person that can count you out when it comes to your goals and your dreams, the only person that has the capacity to stop you from accomplishing that thing that you want to accomplish is ultimately, guess who? It's you. That you're the only person ultimately who can count you out. Not your spouse, not an individual that decided to put a label on you, not your circumstances, not somebody else in their opinion, but the only person that can ultimately count you out with your dreams and your goals, the only person that can count you out is you. And so I had an opportunity there. I was conducting this training, and during there's a certain portion of our training in which I allow some of the participants to come to the front of the room to share their story. And so during the time that I was sharing this story, there's one gentleman who decided to come up to the front of the room, and it was his opportunity to share a story. And so he gets up in the front of the room, and he starts sharing the story, and he says, hey, I want to talk to you guys about this young man who had actually, unfortunately, started making the wrong decision and the wrong choices. And in middle school, he started hanging around with the wrong crowd and started engaging in activities and actually started stealing. And because of that, it was causing him to really get in a lot of issues with his parents and also there at the school. And he said that unfortunately, because this young man was hanging around the wrong people and making the poor decisions, that it didn't just stop in middle school, it carried on into high school. And as a matter of fact, in the high school, the issues got even worse. It went from just stealing to now he got involved in actually using drugs, and actually not just using drugs, but actually selling drugs. As a matter of fact, things got so bad that this young man ended up getting kicked out of school and had to go into an alternative school. And many of the people who looked on at his life counted him out. Many of the people looked on at him as some kind of delinquent, as somebody who basically was just going to be another statistic. But somewhere along the line, somebody saw something in him. Somewhere along the line that he was able to see something in himself. And so everybody who's sitting in the room, they're engaged and they're looking forward and they're seeing this person who's sharing the story. And of course, we can't wait to hear who he's talking about. And ultimately, he gets to the end of the story and he says, that young man is me. And so all of us are in the room, we're in shock. And the reason why we're in shock, and I need you to understand, the young man who was at the front of the room was the student body president. He is the president, the student body president of this entire college. And he has been elected by his peers because of his leadership, because of his talents, because of his ability to connect with people. And nobody thought for a moment that this young man who's student body president, this young man who's standing in front of everybody in this suit, this young man who's articulate, this young man who has these gifts, these skills, these talents, nobody thought in a moment that this would be the same young man that at one point in his life had been counted out. So my question for you is, have you ever been counted out? Has somebody looked on at your circumstances? Has somebody looked on at maybe some poor decisions that you've made in the past? Have you maybe perhaps been involved in one toxic relationship for another, and you've counted yourself out? You said, you know what, I'll never be happy and fulfilled in a relationship. Have you perhaps made one poor investment decision after another? You've lost a lot of money and you've counted yourself out and you said it's never going to happen. Or maybe perhaps that you're older now and unfortunately you think about some things that you want to do and you realize that you never had an opportunity to do it, and now you've counted yourself out and you're starting to believe that there's no way that's going to happen for you. And if that's the case, I want to remind you of something that George Eliot said, and here's what he said. He said, it's never too late to become the person that you could have been. That it's never too late for you right now, if you've been thinking about starting the business, for you to start the business. It's not too late if you've been thinking about writing the book, for you to write the book. It's not too late if you've been thinking on working your voice and developing on your voice and eventually becoming a speaker and a trainer and becoming a coach and an author. It's not too late if you've been thinking about positioning yourself to get out of debt. No, it's never too late to become the person that you could have been. Don't count yourself out. No. As a matter of fact, the only person that can count you out is yourself. You know, I can tell you this. I remember being in college, and you know, at the time when I was in college, as many of you know, that I am a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and during the time that I was there, I held the position of pole mark, which is equivalent to the position as president. And you know, I've had an opportunity to be able to lead some of my fraternity brothers while I was there on campus. And I've got to be honest with you. You know, if we were to take a vote like you do a lot of times in high school or you do in college, and you were to come up with some superlatives, as I believe that's the sophisticated name that they have. So there's certain individuals that you would say, you know what, this is the person, you know, that's most likely to make everybody laugh. This is the person that's most likely to succeed. This is the person who's most likely to not succeed. And I've got to be honest with you, you know, there's one of our fraternity brothers that I can honestly say that if we were to take a vote, and if we were to say that, you know, somebody who is most likely not the person that we would elect or the person that would come to the forefront of your mind for somebody who's going to eventually have a great deal of success. And I don't think it's necessarily because we didn't believe that he possessed it, but none of us during the time that we were there, that we really got to see that aspect of him. And so I remember when we sort of graduated from college, I remember that he decided to just take his vehicle and he went up to go work for his brother. And so we all just, you know, we determined, I mean, there's a group of guys, the one particular guy who, while we were in college, he had already wrote a book. He had already been a recipient of an award. He was delivering keynote messages. There's another one of the guys who had a military background, who had actually played for the football team, and who was actually president of the student body at Florida State University. And, you know, some of the guys that had just high GPAs, you know, we knew for sure those guys were going to be successful. But this young man, this particular young man that I'm telling you about, I believe that most people counted him out. They didn't believe for a moment that he was going to do anything extraordinary in his life. They didn't believe for a moment that he'd be the one to do anything significant. And so there was quite some time that most people had lost tabs on him. And throughout the years in which after we graduated from college, I remember we were having a conversation, and I remember one particular time I'm standing outside, and I was standing outside of my house, and I remember I was going out to my car, and I got a phone call from this particular fraternity brother of mine. And he said, "Hey, Andy, man, I just wanted to give you a call." I said, "What's up?" He said, "Hey, man, I remember, you know, back in college, man, you were, you know, really into cars, and you said you had spent a couple years going with your brothers to the auction and so forth, man." He says, "But, you know, I'm actually at a dealership right now, and, man, I just wanted to get your input. I'm looking to get a new car, and I'm looking to place an order, and I'm trying to decide between the models." I said, "Oh, man, that's awesome. Congratulations. So what are you getting?" And so I'm assuming he's going to say, you know, I'm getting like a Toyota or something modest. And he says, "Well, actually, I'm at the Mercedes-Benz dealership." I said, "Whoa, Mercedes-Benz." I said, "Whoa, that's awesome. Okay, well, what are you getting, a certified used car?" He said, "No, actually, I'm ordering a new Mercedes-Benz." I said, "Whoa, well, what kind of Mercedes-Benz?" He says, "Yes, a S500. I said, "A S500. That's going to run you anywhere between 80,000 to 120,000. He said, yeah, I know. I said, well, what are you doing? And he says, oh man, I know we haven't spoken in a while. I went and I was working for my brother for a while, man. But after working for my brother for a while, I decided to go off on my own. And so I took the knowledge that I got from my brother and I decided to start my own company. And I got 2 other partners and we've been working like crazy. And so during the first year, we had about $200,000 worth of sales. And then during the second year, we had over $750,000 in sales. And now we're in the 3rd year. And now we're not even through the 3rd year. We're about 6 months into the 3rd year. And so far our sales are about $1.3 million in gross sales. $1.3 million? Are you kidding me? I said, wow. I said, man, that's awesome, man. Congratulations, man. I'm so happy to hear that. And so I remember getting off the phone with him. And I didn't want to bring this up in the conversation. But for me, it was a lesson. Because, see, here's what I realized. That most of us, we had counted them out. You see, we didn't see that side of him. We didn't see the side of him that had the ability to hustle. We didn't see the side of him that had the ability to become a CEO. We didn't see the side of him that had the ability to be creative and leverage his gifts. No, our perception of him was limited. And so because of that, we counted him out. And so here's what I say to you right now. That there's a strong possibility that maybe perhaps at one point or another somebody else counted you out, or even perhaps you counted yourself out. Yeah. If somebody told you that you wouldn't amount to anything, somebody told you that the business would never work for you, somebody told you that it's too late for you to go back and get a degree, somebody told you that it wouldn't be possible for you, or maybe perhaps you told yourself, within the inner conversation of your mind, you told yourself that if I write this book, nobody's going to read it. You told yourself that nobody's going to respect me if I don't have the right initials behind my name. You told yourself that I'm too old to go back and sit in a classroom. You told yourself that it's too late for me to get out of debt. You told yourself that I'm never going to have a happy relationship. You told yourself, you counted yourself out. And I want to remind you that the only person that has power over your goals and dreams, the only person that has power over what it is that you're able to accomplish, the only person that has power to overcome whatever it is that you want to do is, guess who? It's you. And so as long as you can refrain from counting yourself out, as long as you can find a way to maybe perhaps borrow from somebody else's belief in you until your belief kicks in, as long as you could perhaps find a way to override that internal conversation that's going on in your mind that's telling you that you don't have enough, that's telling you that you don't have the resources, that's telling you that you don't have the connections, that's telling you that you'll never amount to anything. If you could just simply find a way to override that conversation that's taking place in those 7 inches, and understanding that regardless of whatever it is that you've gone through in life, that you have ability to push forward whatever it is that you've gone through in life. And it doesn't matter if you've had any kind of setbacks. If you could just recall that what Willie Jolly said, he said that a setback is a set up for a comeback. If you could just recall what a student of mine, Louis Morier, says, is that when life knocks you down, guess what? You don't have to stay there. No. There's something in you that you have the ability to get back up. That even when you've been counted out, even when you've counted yourself out, that you can dig deep, that you can hear one thing, and that you can create a shift. And all of a sudden you can decide to change your life. Like that young man who was in my training today, that he simply made a decision and followed that with action. And this young man who was a delinquent at one point, this young man who got kicked out of high school, this young man who was in an alternative school program, this young man who had problems and issues and had been counted out, this young man at one point made a decision. And he followed that decision with action, and he was able to change his life. And so I don't know right now what circumstances you've been through. I don't know what you've experienced that perhaps have made you want to count yourself out. I don't know what kind of setbacks you face. I don't know who has perhaps counted you out. I don't know what kind of challenges you faced in the past. I don't know what kind of disappointments you've had in the past, but here's what I know. What I know is that at any moment that you can change this thing around. I know that at any moment, the same way that you counted yourself out, you can count yourself back in. And so if you took yourself out of the game, you can put yourself back in. And so it starts off by making a decision. And so if you're listening to me right now, I want you to start off by making a decision. Make a decision that right now, that regardless if you've counted yourself out, make the decision that this is your time, that you're ready to put yourself back in the game. Make the decision that you're going to write the book. Make the decision that you're going to go back to school. Make the decision that you're going to start the business. Make the decision that you're going to do this career change. Make this decision that you're going to do something extraordinary with your life. And as much energy as it takes to count yourself out, but you had to validate that. You had to focus on your past disappointments. You had to focus on all the things that you didn't have. You had to focus on the conversations that you've had in the past. You had to focus on the people who didn't believe in you. You had to focus on those limited conversations that are going on in your mind. That you can take that same effort, that same time, that same energy, and count yourself back in. And stop thinking about the limitations, but start thinking about the possibilities. And stop thinking about the conversations about all the things that you can't do, and start thinking about what it is that you can do. And think about the words of Theodore Roosevelt when he said what? That you can do the best you can with what you have, with where you are right now. And so the question is, what do you have right now that you can draw from? What are your gifts? What are your skills? What are your talents that you can apply? That regardless if you've been counted out, if they told you that you couldn't do it, that you could put yourself back in the game. And so here's what most people don't know. You see, I told you, I grew up in a Haitian household. And even though I was born here in the United States, growing up in my early years in the household, my mom and my father in the household, they spoke Creole primarily. And so when they enrolled me into elementary school, my English, in spite of the fact that I was born here in the United States, my English wasn't as good as it should have been. And so here I am in elementary school starting off, and there are a couple of times that the teachers are calling upon me to answer some questions, and they're calling upon me to make a couple of remarks, and they're finding that I'm having some difficulty in responding. And they're finding that I'm not picking up the material as fast as the other kids. And so one of the teachers made an observation and decided to share with the guidance counselor. And so the guidance counselor decided to call my mom in, and she came into the school. And when she came into the school and she met up with them, and they're giving her one set of observations, but my mom is saying that, I'm hearing what you all are saying, but I know for sure that my son is bright. I know this for sure, and I'm not just saying this because I'm his mother. And I know that maybe perhaps it's because, he's a U.S. citizen, but we speak Creole often in the house, and maybe perhaps he's just having a little bit of difficulty. And so is there anybody who could maybe help? Is there anybody that can help out? And they said, you know what? Actually, we have this teacher here. Her name is Marie Jean-Pierre. And she is of Haitian descent. And maybe perhaps you could have a conversation with her and see if there's anything that she could do to be able to help you since she's here at the school. And so my mom sat down with this woman, me, my mom, and this woman who would eventually end up being like a second mom to me. And at a moment when everybody else had counted me out, at a moment where everybody else had sort of dismissed and were ready to begin to label me, that my mom and this woman who would eventually become like my second mom, they counted me back in. And so this woman, every single day when school ended, she would take me home with her, and she would sit down with me at the kitchen table for 2 to 3 hours during the day. And she would pour into me. She would go through my homework with me over and over again. And she's the one who taught me, and these weren't the words that she used at the moment, but she taught me the principle that how you do anything is how you do everything. She's the one that during the process of me doing my schoolwork, she would ask me when I turned it into her, Andy, is this the best that you could do? And when I would answer her and say that no, it's not the best, she said, well, let's do it again. She's the one that taught me that the only competition that you have is yourself. And it's not a matter of being better than the person next to you on the right and the left. It's a matter of being better than who you were yesterday. And she's the person that ultimately will allow me to graduate from elementary school with straight A's, go on to middle school and get straight A's, go on to high school and graduate with above a 4.0 GPA, and to go on to college and graduate summa cum laude. Why? Because she was willing to count me in when everybody else had counted me out. And so you won't always have somebody in your life to count you back in. There won't always be somebody else who's going to intercede on your behalf. And so because of that, sometimes you've got to be the one to look yourself in the mirror. You've got to be the one to hold up your hand. You've got to be the one to hold up your head and say to yourself that even though I've been counted out, even though they don't believe that I can start this business, even though they don't believe that I can write this book, even though they don't believe that I can find a way to save my marriage, even though they don't believe that I can get out of debt, even though they don't believe that I have this gift, this skill, this talent, that I am going to count myself back in. And so I'm going to ask you this question again. And the question is, have you counted yourself out? And if you have, I want to remind you that the only person that can refrain and keep you from realizing your goals and your dreams, the only person that can officially count you out is you. And if you want to create a shift, if you want to create a change, if you want to realize your goals and your dreams, if you want to change your marriage around, if you want to change your finances around, if you want to be able to position yourself to live the life that you always want to do, if you want to be able to manifest what George Eliot said and understand that the only person and at any moment in your life that you can ultimately become the person that you always wanted to be, that I want you right now in this moment to count yourself back in. And it simply starts off with a decision. And once you make that decision, understand that of course it's going to require some work. It's going to require for you to dig in deep. It's going to require you to override that conversation that's going on in your mind that tells you that I can't do this. The conversation that's saying I'm too old. The conversation that's saying I don't have the resources. The conversation that says that, you know what, I tried this out and it didn't work out. And I want to remind you that once again, you can count yourself back in. I know it's possible. And here's what I know, that you wouldn't be on this phone right now. You wouldn't be listening to this message. You wouldn't be listening to this replay. You would not be listening to this message if this wasn't your time. No, this message is for you. And what I say to you is, it's time. And instead of you counting yourself out, you've got to count yourself in. Yeah. This is your time. This has been Andy Henriquez reminding you to always show up for your life. Because if you don't, ladies and gentlemen, nobody else will. Yes, yes.